What's up, guys? Thanks for clicking on the video. Hope you guys are having a wonderful and an awesome day. In today's video, we're going to be checking out a video by Squidge Rugby about Major League Rugby. Apparently is a rugby league here in the United States. I am an American and I have been a massive fan of the NFL throughout my entire life. Still am a fan of the NFL, but have never really appreciated rugby for the beautiful sport that it is, and so that's basically the whole purpose of this channel. If you're new here, consider subscribing. If you've been here since the beginning, you'll notice that the name of the channel has changed. We are rebranding the channel. The reason for this is I am a seminary student. I am working on earning a Master's of Divinity, and so I have a lot of academic interests and pursuits and aspirations academically, and so I don't want people who are searching for maybe an academic paper that I've written or a theological book that I've written. I don't necessarily want them to be searching for my work on the internet and have to go through so much rugby content to find my academic work. So I'm trying to separate my name from the rugby content, and so we're just going to go with Luke's Sports Academy. The reason for it being Sports Academy is I'm here at school, so it seemed to fit for me, and beyond that, it's not me trying to teach sports to anyone. It's me rather learning from you guys about the sport of rugby or other sports. Maybe it's hockey or maybe it's cricket, other sports that I'm just not very familiar with, lacrosse even, not very familiar with, and sports I want to learn. So that's why we're calling it Luke's Sports Academy. But without any further ado, we're going to check out this video by Squidge Rugby telling us all about the Major League Rugby in America. Here we go.
I don't think there's anything about life worth learning that you can't pick up from American teen movies. Sure, Sun Tzu might have had some wisdom to dispense, but until someone updates the art of war to say whether or not you can just ask people why they're white, Karen, oh my god, I'll stand by Clueless, Heathers and Booksmart as seminal text, the seminal text on modern life. And yet, if teen movies have taught me anything, and considering I literally did a master's degree on them, I really hope they have, it's that nothing is quite as important as being yourself. And there is everything to be celebrated about being different. This is why I love Major League Rugby, an outcast sent to sit on their own at lunchtime. MLR is the oddball that doesn't quite fit in with the plastics of Europe, the theatre geeks of Super Rugby, or even the cool Asians in the top league. Its family don't quite get it. Cool older brother, Major League Soccer, is currently applying to the cool colleges. Cousins, NHL and NBA barely know they exist, and American Rugby's dad, the NFL, who weirdly is younger than their son, looks down its nose patronisingly to our scrappy young hero. MLR is the perfect protagonist for a high-concept teen movie that nobody will ever seemingly let me make. Because approached from either a rugby or an American sports market perspective, MLR is weird, but in a kind of John Hughesy way that means actually, really, they're super hot, they're just wearing glasses. Set up to chase a golden goose that had already laid all its eggs, instead of the intended cross-Atlantic cash cow, after 2.5 seasons, MLR is blossoming into a kind of mad, explosive alternative to any other sporting entertainment. It helps that rugby itself is like someone crossed gridiron with thermite, but the league is unlike anything else. Their season might be over for now, but with new teams sprouting up all the time and more high-profile players jumping across the pond all the time, it's worth exploring just why you should all be really, totally butt-crazy in love with MLR. The story of Major League Rugby is itself, once again, much like a teen movie. Nerdy girl, the United States of America, was convinced the oh-so-dreamy prospect of professional rugby didn't know they existed, until, out of nowhere, in 2015, he asked her to the prom. And before the US can even consider whether it's too good to be true, Pro Rugby begins. Now, Pro Rugby was the bonkers brainchild of a former bonds trader named Douglas Schroninger, and that name proved proficient because this was a league that was never dead nor alive. Schroninger had scarcely heard the word ruck in his life until he happened to watch a match at the 2015 World Cup in London whilst on #business, and as 80,000 people screamed at the referee, Schroninger, who I presume is a cartoon oil baron, that's how he pictures it in my head, had dollar signs flash from his eyes. The American public didn't know it yet, but they needed rugby. And they pay so much for the privilege of finding out. And so, 1 year and 1 copy of Rugby Union for Dummies later, Schröninger is ploughing what ended up being around $6 million of his own money into starting the USA's first pro rugby league. Except the moment the USA arrived at prom, she realised
empty bleachers.
it should have been obvious. Schröninger might have been well-meaning, but as they entered the building, down poured the buckets of blood. Pro rugby lasted 1 season before falling into an enormous and litigious mess. A disagreement between Schröninger and USA Rugby underpinning the first season, a kind of ugly undercurrent. Everyone avoided to focus on the fact that players were actually being paid to play like full-time rugby in America. It was actually happening, but given an off-season in which to just focus on that and not have rugby being played, Schröninger went for some extreme brinksmanship tactics, terminating the contracts of every single player in the league because the national governing body refused to grant him exclusive rights to operate a pro league in America. Everything fell apart, and because it's the USA, the legal case is still not over. However, the death of pro rugby ultimately proved to be the Mockingjay moment. That autumn, having seen what might be possible, clubs began to gather and discuss amongst themselves the foundation of a new league, learning from the mistakes of their predecessor. And so, just 10 months on from the first match in that first league, from its ashes emerges Major League Rugby, the league on fire. There's a callback. 6 of the 7 teams who will compete in their opening season a year later were in place, with the one addition being a new specially created franchise. And so the league begins. Now, Major League Rugby has 2 basic purposes.
Empty bleachers,
One,
man. Wow.
to grow rugby in the USA, both financially and culturally. Unlike
awesome.
pro rugby, there are no ambitions to overthrow the NBA or change the NFL's tagline to America's forward pastime, but just to turn rugby into a game that families in Kentucky or Maine might go to watch on a Sunday. The idea is to make rugby a legitimate sport in the US rather than to make rugby the biggest sport in the US. And this then has a knock-on effect on the second purpose, which is to develop talent for the national team, the USA Eagles. Unlike sock ball, where many consider the domestic league a higher honour than the international competition, or baseball, where the World Series is contested between Boston and New York, not France and Uruguay, rugby is nominally built in quite a direct pyramid structure. International rugby is the main game. It's the pinnacle, the highest standard, the highest prestige, the highest pay, the best players playing the best quality rugby. Whilst most pro leagues are competitive in their own right in rugby, they're often really kind of there to feed and create the next international players. Each layer feeds the next. Each level's job is to create players capable of playing at the next intensity up. Grassroots feeds semi-pro, semi-pro feeds the second tier pro competitions, which in turn feeds the top flight leagues, which in turn then can be stepped up to the European Cup standard and to the kind of Super Rugby playoff standard, which eventually then feeds into test matches, which can then be taken one step further into World Cups, and then you also have kind of the World Cup semi and final and Lion Series matches. It's a linear system, and as a player, you normally work your way up or down. There are no real lateral moves, and beyond the age of about 19, you rarely see players jumping more than one step at a time. However, there's one key exception to that pyramid, because Major League Rugby looks at this structure and laughs. Like Glenn Frey in 1971, the eventual goal is still to create Eagles, but otherwise MLR exists simultaneously on every single point of this pyramid. MLR is every member of the Breakfast Club at once. Whilst the Premiership might have moments of mistakes, you can watch 30 seconds of Major League Rugby and see every possible variation of the sport imaginable. In one patch of the play, the standard goes from a chuckabout in the park to the World Cup final. It's brilliant. The worst pass you've ever seen might result in a spellbinding moment of genius. A kick 30 metres off target might lead to the most acrobatic, beautiful bit of skill. You'll see it on any pitch in any sport all year. MLR is openly and wonderfully mad. Whereas other leagues have established styles, MLR is just as likely to show the unapologetic flair of Super Rugby, the uninhibited risk-taking of the Pro 14, or the genuine cannibalism of the Pro Duh. And that's just in the crowd. This leads to a beautifully unique style of rugby. The closest thing is probably really the women's Six Nations, in that offence is far more consistently elite standard than defence. Teams tend to organise as per the top flight sides you'll see in Test Rugby, but play is slightly more instinctive. Defences aren't nearly as quick as they are in Europe, so players are given an extra half second to make decisions. And just look what a truly world-class player can do with that time. Marnonu might not be on a restricted diet as he was with the All Blacks, but he has such vision. It's incredible to watch him tear things up, spotting space others couldn't even see. Kicking tactics are fairly old school in that they either tend to be attack-minded chips and grubbers or a traditional kind of sacrifice of possession for territory, rather than the more modern approach, which is basing it around chasing and momentum, of hanging a high ball and telling your winger to go and make fetch happen. Breakdowns tend to be won quickly or stood off entirely. Former England skipper Chris Robshaw is headed over partly because he's a big name and a handsome lad, but he's exactly the kind of player MLR is very light on. Irritants who slow opposition ball and make life difficult as possible for the opposition 9. I recognise that sentence probably makes no sense if you're a rugby outsider and kind of watching this to get a background on this new league you're thinking about maybe watching. But basically, right, teams in MLR tend to retain their own possession unless they make a handling error or kick it away. More often than in a lot of other leagues, there are some players who are experts in making that far less simple. One such man is headed over the league next season. Because that's what an MLR squad looks like. Teams are made up of an equal mix of world-class, worldwide stars of the game and normal working dudes who spent the last few years driving themselves across state lines to play each weekend in what was considered a local derby. There's a novelty to it that's unlike anything else. MLR is a vivid, magical dream where a 90-cap All Black centre partner is a conspiracy theorist who used to work in a shoe shop. It's a league where Tendai Tarariwa, one of the best props of all time, follows up causing literal chaos in the World Cup, the actual World Cup final, by being eaten alive by a part-timer. Look at this step by teacher and part-time juggler Danny Collins. He's beating Marnonu, all-time great double World Cup winner Marnonu. Marnonu's being turned inside out by a forgotten Al Pacino film. Because that's the best thing about MLR. On every front, it has to be seen to be relieved. I could tell you right now that I am a huge fan of the Denver Loglines and their starting halfback combination of Francois Pastel and Mikey Johnson III. I'm not. They don't exist. Yet if I told you they'd formed a deadly partnership with Argentina legend Felipe Contepomio the last year, you'd honestly believe it. I could tell you that Atlanta have a winger called Harley Davidson, and not even that would be too far, because it's true.
My name's Harley Davidson, and I play wing with the Glendale Raptors.
There's a winger playing for Atlanta called Harley Davidson. No, it's not like the prop called Ferrari who plays for Italy. No, the quickest player is called Harley Davidson. MLR has a winger called Harley. Come on, you can't not love this. If you're new to rugby, chances are little of this will mean anything to you. But trust me when I say the joy is infectious. There's still the odd teething problem. The match presentation obviously doesn't have the budget of the coverage in Europe, and crowds may not match up to Friday Night Lights, but it's just fun. Major League Rugby is the oddball nobody who moved here from another school and is often ignored or picked on unfairly, but really? Scratch beneath the surface and they're the coolest, wisest, funniest kid in school. Rough around the edges and still a work in progress, but this kid could teach Sun Tzu a few things, and not just about like skateboarding or iPhones. Major League Rugby doesn't return until early next year, but there's no way this wonderful, weird kid should be allowed to sit alone at lunchtimes anymore. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. I am going to pick this up and do a video on the actual teams in MLR, the actual teams contesting it, close to the time of it coming back, so something to hopefully look forward to. In the meantime, some of you may have noticed that my video on the Springboks winning the World Cup, the kind of 36-minute analysis of the whole campaign, has been taken down. I was asked to take it down by a representative of Rugby.
All right. So my thoughts on the video. So, yeah, I'm definitely not going to ignore Major League Rugby and let it sit off alone anymore. I do live in the U.S. I noticed. So, a couple things. It looked like there was a team from Dallas. And if that's the case, you know I'm going to be a Dallas fan. I've got to support my Dallas teams. I am from Dallas, Texas originally. I live in New Orleans now, but I grew up in Texas and still consider myself a Texan. So if there's a Dallas rugby team, that's going to be the team I have my allegiance to. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, Dallas Mavericks in the NBA, Texas Rangers in Major League Baseball. yes, I support a Dallas Stars in hockey, although I don't know anything about hockey. I've been to a Stars game, just don't know anything about hockey. Yeah, so gotta support my Dallas teams. Definitely interesting to hear how it seems as if rugby is starting to take off in America, and hopefully it succeeds. I'd love for rugby to be a part of our just normal sports vocabulary. We tend to not care as much about it, and that's a shame because rugby is a great sport. I would love to have rugby in America that wasn't just like the video of Ross playing rugby on Friends. That epic masterpiece. I like rugby just is so foreign to us, and it's mysterious, and so I'd love for it to be part of our normal vernacular. So that being said, if you like what you saw in this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, joining the channel. Man, all we do over here is I learn the sport of rugby. That's it. I'm learning sports that I don't know because they're not as popular over here, and so like I plan on checking out some cricket. I plan on checking out lacrosse and other sports that are international sports that don't necessarily get that much press over here in the US. But if you like what you saw in the video, please consider joining the channel. You can go over to Patreon for full, uncut, unedited reactions, full videos, and a few extra perks over there. That link will be down in the description below. Thank you guys so much for clicking on the video. I hope you have a great day. See you in the next one. Peace.